Hey everyone, this is Karenology. You won't believe what happened this time. Let's dive into another wild and dramatic story. The Homeowner Association just decided that my property is now theirs, and they're trying to force me to sell my land. I never signed up for their rules, never paid their ridiculous fees, and never wanted to be part of their little kingdom. But that didn't stop them from declaring war on me. I moved into my house about 5 years ago. It wasn't much, but it was mine. A small, sturdy home with a detached garage, sitting right on the edge of an upscale neighborhood ruled by an overzealous homeowner association. Unlike the pristine, cookie-cutter houses in their gated community, my place had character. It wasn't covered in beige stucco or burdened by manicured hedges. It was simple, practical, and, most importantly, free from the grip of the homeowner association. Or, at least, that's what I thought. It started with a letter in the mail. "Welcome to the community," it read, as if I had just moved in. It went on to explain that the Homeowner Association had recently expanded its jurisdiction to include my property and that I was now obligated to comply with their regulations. The letter listed a series of demands: repaint my house in an approved neutral color, remove my unsightly detached garage, and, of course, begin paying monthly homeowner association fees. I laughed. Then I shredded the letter and tossed it in the trash. I should have known that was just the beginning. A few days later, I found Karen standing in my driveway. She fit every stereotype perfectly. Short, platinum blonde hair, a floral blouse stretched over her self-righteous fury, arms crossed as she surveyed my property like a queen inspecting her domain. "We need to talk," she announced before I could even say a word. "No, we don't." I stepped around her and unlocked my front door, but she followed me right up to the porch. "You haven't responded to our notice. The deadline for compliance is approaching. We need to see progress on your property adjustments." "There's not going to be any progress because I'm not part of your homeowner association," I said. "I didn't sign anything, I never agreed to your rules, and you don't have authority over my property." Karen smiled, and that was the moment I knew she had been waiting for this. "That's where you're wrong," she said, pulling a folder from her oversized purse. "The association recently held a community vote, and it was decided that our jurisdiction would extend to include your property. As of last month, your home is officially part of the Homeowner Association." I took the folder from her hands and flipped through the documents. A bunch of signatures, names I didn't recognize, a notice about an homeowner association meeting I had never been invited to. "This isn't legal," I said. "Oh, but it is. The city approved the expansion. Your land is now under our governance and you have responsibilities as a community member. I suggest you start taking them seriously." I shut the door in her face. The next morning, a fine was taped to my front door. $500 for non-compliance with Homeowner Association exterior standards. The day after that, another fine. $300 for an unapproved structure on the property. The detached garage. The fines kept coming, escalating each time. The messages became more threatening. "Legal action will be taken if violations persist." They were trying to bury me in paperwork, hoping I'd fold. That's when I knew I had to fight back. I drove downtown to the city records office, determined to prove that my property was never part of the homeowner association. The clerk, an older man named Sam, shuffled through ancient files before shaking his head. "Your lot was never originally included in the homeowner association," he said, "but—" He pulled up a document on his computer. "It looks like the zoning was changed a few months ago. Now it's listed under their jurisdiction." "How the hell did that happen?" I asked. "It happens when city officials get pressured by the right people," Sam muttered. "Developers, homeowner associations, real estate investors. There's money in it. Someone wanted your land bad enough to pull strings." My stomach twisted. This wasn't just Karen being a control freak. Someone higher up wanted my land, and they had enough influence to make it happen. I thanked Sam and left, gripping the useless paperwork in my hands. If the city was in on it, how the hell was I supposed to fight back? I barely made it home before another surprise hit me. My garage door was covered in red spray paint. Sell or pay. That night, I sat on my porch, staring at my vandalized garage, feeling the pressure closing in from every side. The Homeowner Association wasn't just annoying, they were dangerous, and I had no idea just how far they were willing to go to get what they wanted, but I wasn't going down without a fight. The next morning, I found another envelope taped to my door. This time, it was a formal notice from the Homeowner Association's legal department, claiming that I had 30 days to either bring my property into compliance or face legal action. The wording was full of legal jargon, but the message was clear. They were escalating their attack. I barely had time to process it before my neighbor Bob shuffled up to my porch, hands in his pockets, face etched with something that looked like both worry and frustration. He had been in the neighborhood for decades, long before the Homeowner Association took over. He eyed the notice in my hands and sighed. "They did the same thing to the Thompsons," he muttered, "and the Johnsons before them. Every time someone refuses to sell, they make their life hell until they break." I asked him what happened to the others. Bob shook his head. "One of them gave in and moved. The other fought them for a while, but their house mysteriously caught fire one night. Nobody could prove anything, but we all knew it wasn't an accident. After that, people just started giving in. No one wanted to be next." I clenched my jaw, the paper crumpling slightly in my grip. "So they get away with it every time?" Bob exhaled slowly, looking around as if making sure no one else was listening. "They have too many connections. The Homeowner Association, the city, even some of the cops. It's all tied together, like a well-oiled machine. You go against one part of it, and the whole thing comes down on you." I thanked him and walked back inside. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to fight, but I had to be smart about it. Going up against an homeowner association backed by the city and real estate developers meant I was walking into a war with people who had money, power, and connections. I needed proof, something that could expose what they were doing. I spent the rest of the day digging through public records, old zoning laws, anything I could find. What I discovered made my blood run cold. My property had been zoned as an independent residential lot for over 40 years. Then, 3 months ago, a request had been pushed through the city planning office to rezone it as part of the Homeowner Association's territory. The paperwork was vague, full of legal jargon, but the signatures at the bottom told me everything I needed to know. The city council had approved the change, and the mayor himself had signed off on it. There were notes attached, references to a new development project, and the name of a real estate investment firm that had contributed significant campaign donations to the mayor's office. I barely had time to process my next move when a loud knock echoed through my house. When I opened the door, 2 uniformed men stood on my porch. "Code enforcement," one of them said flatly. "We received multiple complaints about violations on your property." He handed me a clipboard with a list of citations: overgrown lawn, unauthorized exterior color, unapproved garage structure, improper driveway width. Some of them were completely fabricated, others were minor technicalities that had never been enforced before. I scoffed. "This is ridiculous. My lawn is fine, my garage has been here for years, and my house color has nothing to do with you." The second officer smirked. "You can take it up with the Homeowner Association," he said before they turned and walked away. I watched them leave, my fists clenched. It was a coordinated attack. They weren't just trying to push me out. They were trying to bury me in so many fines and legal threats that I'd have no choice but to sell. That night, I installed security cameras around my house. If they wanted to keep pushing, I was going to push back. But just as I finished setting up the last camera, my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. I hesitated before answering. "You're making a mistake," a voice said low and cold. "Walk away now, or this gets worse." The line went dead before I could respond. I stood there in the dark, gripping my phone, the weight of the situation settling on my shoulders. They weren't just playing dirty. They were threatening me. And if they thought I was going to back down, they were dead wrong. Sleep didn't come easy that night. Every sound outside made me tense. Every car passing by felt like a potential threat. At around 2 in the morning, I heard something outside and checked the cameras. A black SUV was parked down the street, its headlights off. It sat there for nearly an hour before finally driving away. I wasn't paranoid. Someone was watching me. The next morning, another fine was posted on my door, this time for unauthorized surveillance equipment. They were penalizing me for protecting my own property. Furious, I grabbed the paper and stormed back inside, slamming the door behind me. I needed to get ahead of this. I needed someone who could help me expose them. I needed to stop playing defense and start fighting back. I called Rick, the investigative journalist I'd worked with a few years back. "Rick, I need your help. I think I'm being targeted by my Homeowner Association, and I think it goes higher than them." The morning after my call to Rick, I woke up to a pounding on my front door. I barely had time to grab my coffee before opening it to find 2 uniformed police officers standing on my porch. Their expressions were unreadable, professional but cold. One of them, a tall man with sharp features, held a clipboard and a folded document. "Mr. Carter, we have a warrant to inspect your property for multiple code violations." I took the paper from his hands and skimmed it. It was full of legalese, but the core message was clear. They were escalating their pressure campaign. I looked past them to see a black SUV idling across the street, the same one from the night before. My stomach tightened. This wasn't just about the Homeowner Association anymore. Someone much higher up was invested in forcing me out. "You can't just barge in here and—" "We can, and we will," the officer interrupted. "You're listed under the Homeowner Association's jurisdiction now, and according to local regulations, we have authority to inspect for compliance issues. Refusing entry will only lead to further legal action." I had no choice but to let them in. They walked the property, taking notes, pointing at small cracks in the driveway, measuring the height of my fence. Every minor imperfection was recorded. When they finally left, they handed me a fresh set of violations with an order to correct them within 10 days or face fines exceeding $10,000. I clenched my jaw as I watched them drive away, my fingers curling around the paper in frustration. They wanted me desperate. They wanted me to fold. But that wasn't happening. That afternoon, I met with Rick in a small diner on the outskirts of town. He was already seated in a booth, stirring a cup of coffee as I slid in across from him. "I did some digging," he said without preamble. "Your Homeowner Association's expansion was pushed through by a city council vote, but it wasn't supposed to be legal. The zoning commission didn't sign off on it. In fact, there were multiple objections filed, but they were overridden. Someone paid to make this happen." I exhaled sharply. "Any idea who?" "The mayor's office and a private real estate group, Sterling Development. They have a vested interest in the new commercial district being planned." He pulled out a file and slid it toward me. "And your property is right where they want to put in a main access road." I flipped through the papers, my pulse hammering in my ears. Land purchase records, donation receipts from Sterling Development to the mayor's re-election campaign, meeting transcripts where city officials discuss the obstacles in the way of progress. And right there, listed under Phase 1, my address. I looked up at Rick. "So they want me gone because my land is inconvenient." "Exactly. The Homeowner Association is just a tool. They strong-arm people into compliance or force them out so the bigger players can swoop in. You're not the first, but you might be the first to fight back." I sat back, gripping the file. "What can we do with this?" "We go public," Rick said. "I can write an expose, push it out to the press. Once the media gets a hold of it, they won't be able to operate in the shadows anymore." It was risky. I wasn't just dealing with an overzealous Homeowner Association anymore. I was up against people with serious money and power. But the alternative was letting them win. Letting them bulldoze my home and get away with it like they had so many others. "Do it," I said. "Expose everything." That night, I double-checked the locks on my doors and windows, installed more security cameras, and slept with a baseball bat next to my bed. I knew they wouldn't take this lying down. The real fight was just beginning. Hours passed, and I found myself waking up at the slightest noise. My paranoia wasn't unfounded. Around 3 in the morning, my security camera alert pinged. I checked my phone and saw the live feed. A shadowy figure creeping along the side of my house, ducking low near my garage. My heart pounded as I watched them disappear into the darkness before I could get a better look. I grabbed my bat and rushed outside, scanning the yard, but they were already gone. The next morning, another fine was posted on my door, this time for unauthorized surveillance equipment. They were penalizing me for protecting my own property. Furious, I grabbed the paper and stormed back inside, slamming the door behind me. I needed to get ahead of this. I needed someone who could help me expose them. I needed to stop playing defense and start fighting back. I called Rick again. I need more than just an article. I need connections, someone inside the city planning office, someone who can confirm how deep this goes. Rick was quiet for a moment. I might know someone. Meet me tonight, same place. And Carter, be careful. These people don't play fair. I arrived at the diner a little early, scanning the parking lot before stepping inside. The last 24 hours had sharpened my paranoia to a knife's edge. Every car that lingered too long, every stranger who seemed out of place, all of it made my skin crawl. I found Rick already seated in the back booth, his usual cup of coffee in front of him, a second cup waiting for me. He nodded as I slid into the seat across from him. "You look like hell." I exhaled sharply, running a hand over my face. "I didn't sleep much. Someone was prowling around my house last night. I barely caught them on camera before they vanished. Then, this morning, I got another fine from the Homeowner Association for having security cameras. They're trying to suffocate me." Rick frowned, stirring his coffee absently. "They want you gone, and they're tightening the screws. I talked to my source in city planning. Turns out the zoning change that put your land under Homeowner Association control, it wasn't even supposed to happen. The paperwork was rushed, and there's a clause in the original document stating that any expansion of the Homeowner Association's jurisdiction requires the explicit consent of all affected property owners." I sat up straighter, which they never got from me. Exactly. They pushed it through under the table, hoping you wouldn't notice until it was too late. If we can prove that the expansion was illegitimate, we might be able to have it overturned. But you need someone on the inside willing to confirm that in writing. I clenched my fists. "Who do you have?" Rick hesitated. "A city planner named Andrea Feldman. She's been working in the department for over a decade. She's seen her fair share of shady deals, but this one is big. She's nervous. She's agreed to meet, but only in person, and she's scared of being linked to it." "Where?" She chose the location, somewhere public where she feels safe. "A bookstore on the other side of town, tomorrow night." I nodded, my mind already spinning with possibilities. If I could get her to confirm in writing that the Homeowner Association's expansion was illegal, I'd have leverage. I'd have something to fight back with. Before I could say anything else, the bell above the diner's door jingled, and I instinctively tensed. 2 men in suits walked in, scanning the room before locking eyes with us. Rick muttered under his breath, "We've got company." The men approached our table, and one of them, a tall, broad-shouldered guy with an expression carved out of stone, slid a business card across the table toward me. "Mr. Carter, we represent parties with a vested interest in resolving this matter amicably." I glanced at the card. No name, just a law firm logo. "You mean the people trying to push me out of my own home?" The second man, shorter and with an air of smug confidence, smiled. "We're here to offer you an alternative solution, a very generous buyout. You take the money, leave town, and this all goes away. No more fines, no more pressure. Just a clean break." I leaned back, crossing my arms. "And if I say no?" The taller man's smile vanished. "Then things get more complicated. Legal battles, financial strain. It can be a long and painful process." I picked up the business card and tore it in half. "Tell your bosses I'm not for sale." The shorter man sighed, shaking his head. "A shame. We'll be in touch." They left without another word. I let out a slow breath, forcing myself to stay calm. Rick watched them go before leaning forward. "You just painted a target on your back." I smirked, despite the weight pressing down on me. They started this war. I'm just making sure they know I'm not going down without a fight. The next day, I arrived at the bookstore an hour early. I wanted to make sure it was safe. I watched from my car, checking for anything suspicious. Andrea arrived right on time, a petite woman with nervous eyes, clutching a messenger bag like it was a lifeline. She glanced around before slipping inside. I followed, keeping my distance as she moved toward the back. When I finally sat across from her, she was already pulling documents from her bag. "This is everything I could find," she whispered. "Emails, internal memos, records of the city council meetings where the expansion was pushed through. They knew it was illegal. They did it anyway." I flipped through the papers, my pulse pounding. This was it. The proof I needed. "Andrea, do you understand what happens if this gets out? They're not going to let this slide." She swallowed hard. "I know, but I can't let them get away with it. They've been doing this for years, ruining people's lives for profit." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You're doing the right thing. I promise I'll make sure this gets out." She nodded, but I could see the fear in her eyes. I had to move fast. Before they realized what I had, before they tried to make it all disappear. I had a small window to strike, and I wasn't going to waste it. I drove home gripping Andrea's documents like they were my last line of defense. The proof I needed was finally in my hands, but I knew I had to move fast. By the time they realized what she had given me, they'd already be working on burying it, or worse, burying me. The house felt different when I stepped inside, like the walls had absorbed my paranoia. I locked the doors, drew the curtains, and spread the documents out across my kitchen table. Emails between city officials and the Homeowner Association, memos confirming under-the-table deals, financial transactions linking the mayor's office directly to Sterling Development. Every piece of evidence screamed corruption. I dialed Rick. When he picked up, his voice was tense. "Tell me you got something." I exhaled. "More than something. I've got them dead to rights. We need to go public now." He was silent for a beat. "Meet me at my office in an hour. Bring everything. We do this right." I barely made it out of my driveway before I noticed the black SUV again, this time parked further down the street. I forced myself to act normal, to drive steady, but my hands gripped the wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I took a longer route to Rick's office, making unnecessary turns, switching lanes unpredictably. They followed. By the time I pulled into a parking garage 2 blocks from Rick's office, I'd had enough. I parked, grabbed my bag, and took the stairs 2 at a time, emerging into the alley behind the building. I kept to the shadows, cutting through side streets until I reached Rick's entrance. When I knocked, he let me in fast and locked the door behind me. "You look like you just ran a marathon." "They're following me, black SUV. Been tailing me since I left home." Rick peeked through the blinds. "You're not being paranoid, that's definitely them. We have to get this out now." We spread the documents across his desk. He read through them, his expression darkening with every page. "This is it. This isn't just an Homeowner Association power trip. This is a full-blown land grab, backed by politicians and corporate money. If this gets out, it'll ruin them." I took out my phone. "I'll call every major news outlet. We go big. We make sure they can't cover this up." Before I could dial, a loud crash echoed through the office. The front door had been kicked in. Rick and I barely had time to react before 2 men in suits stormed inside. One of them grabbed Rick by the collar, shoving him against the desk. The other lunged for me, but I swung my bag hard, knocking him back. Papers flew everywhere. The one holding Rick growled, "You don't know who you're messing with. Walk away now and you might keep breathing." I took a slow step forward. "You're scared. That's why you're here. You wouldn't be if you thought you could bury this." The man's grip tightened on Rick's shirt. "Last chance. Drop it." I met Rick's eyes. Then I grabbed my phone and hit the button I'd been ready for, live streaming the whole thing. The feed was already rolling. "Say that again for the camera." The man froze. The realization hit them both at the same time. Thousands of people were watching now. The threats, the break-in, all of it was live. I could see the panic in their eyes. Rick shoved the guy off him. "I'd leave now if I were you." They hesitated, but the damage was done. The one who had grabbed Rick let go, shooting me a venomous glare before storming out. His partner followed, slamming the broken door behind them. My phone buzzed almost immediately. Messages flooded in. Reporters, lawyers, even a few government officials. The story had blown up in real time. The corruption, the threats, everything was out in the open now. Rick let out a breathless laugh. "You just put a bullet through their whole operation." I ran a hand through my hair. "I just hope it's enough." 2 days later, the mayor resigned. Sterling Development pulled out of the project. The Homeowner Association board collapsed under the weight of lawsuits and media scrutiny. Karen vanished. No one knew where she went, and, frankly, I didn't care. I kept my house, my land, and for the first time in weeks I slept soundly. But as I walked outside the next morning, enjoying the quiet, I saw an envelope taped to my mailbox. No return address, just a single piece of paper inside. "You won this battle, but the war never ends." I crumpled the note in my fist. Let them try.